More than $135,000 has been raised for Luigi Mangioni's legal defense fund. It's a crowdfunding effort started by a group called the December 4th Legal Committee. Their total fundraising goal as of now, $500,000, and they just might get there. The organizers, alluding to the date United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down on the streets of Manhattan. But they say it's not about the violence from that day. They write, this is a preemptive legal fundraiser for the suspect allegedly involved in the shooting of United Healthcare CEO. We are not here to celebrate violence, but we do believe in the constitutional right of fair legal representation, unquote. But as for the people donating, well, some of them are full on celebrating Mangioni's actions, and the donations are coming in at all sorts of amounts, from the highest at $1,300, some as low as $5. One person writes under their $10 donation, I'm quoting here, "The shot heard around the nation. We cannot let it be in vain. You made the first stand. Thank you." Another person donated $500 writing this, "I hope this entire event leads to a rethinking of the wealthy people running this country. Health insurance has been a scam for far too long, and it needs to change. Stop talking about it and do something." Well, I want to bring in Sam Beard. He is the spokesperson for the December 4th Legal Committee and the host of Party Girls podcast. Sam, thank you for joining this evening. How many donations have you received this far? And are you surprised to see the level of support for someone who is a murder suspect?
Laura, thank you for having me on and for covering this important topic. So far we have received over 4,700 individual donations, averaging about, it seems, $15 or so at the median there. And to be honest, I'm really not that surprised that all of this widespread support has sort of risen up in this moment for this young man alleged to have taken action in this way. I think Americans are fed up with the way of that the health insurance system operates.
When you think about you said taking action in this way, he is accused of having committed murder. You've gotten people who've donated to the fund who are embracing and celebrating that murder of this man, Brian Thompson. What do you say to your critics who think this fundraiser is co-signing that murder?
Well, at the end of the day, every American has a right to a fair trial. And I think for every person who might be exhibiting some sense of joy, there are 10 people sort of asking the question, well, who's the real murderer in this conversation? We're talking about the largest and most successful private health insurance corporation in the history of humankind, right? Which is successful precisely because they generate profits by denying claims, among other things. Just to quote one donor here directly, quote, "We do not condone murder. And for that reason, we cannot condone the actions of United Healthcare. Luigi was standing up to a systematized murder of millions of Americans at the hands of a broken healthcare system."
When you hear that, of course, first of all, I'm a former prosecutor. Everyone deserves a proper legal defense. And frankly, he is presumed innocent at this point in time. They have a burden of proof that they have to carry out. But when there seems to be the equivalence drawn between gunning somebody down in the streets, and again, he is presumed innocent, but somebody gunning him down in the streets, and then the idea of a health insurance company behaving in the way that has led to, you believe, the deaths of people as well. Are you concerned that that sort of equivalence is going to instigate further harm?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, as a moral matter, it's horrible when anybody has their life cut short by another person, especially when it could have been prevented, right? But that same logic has to apply both ways. A CEO had his life short, a world-renowned CEO for being very effective in his field, mind you, but he was effective because he profited from denying people's claims, which cut their lives short. So we can't just apply a simple moral rule without acknowledging that we're in an immoral system that degrades the value of some lives while elevating the value of others. And I think what's sort of plain as day at this point is challenging that is above all a political act. And when we treat it only as a moral act, I think we're plugging our ears to its political meaning.
I certainly hear the political consequences and conversations that are going on. This will be dealt with in the criminal court system. So the idea of how it'll be addressed will be quite distinct from that overall conversation. I'm learning, though, that one of Mangioni's lawyers told my network that he would not accept the money. So what will your group do with it?
So I'm wondering if that's the conversation that happened about a week ago. I'm not sure.
Hmm. Has there
Um,
been a recent development that you think he will take the money?
no, but there's been a recent development in terms of sort of an expanded legal team. So I would imagine there's different decision makers in that process. And we have yet to establish two-way communication with their newest legal team. We have contacted them via telephone, email, and good old-fashioned snail mail.
Well, we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for joining us, Sam Beard.
Thank you.
Well, Mangione is expected to be in court next week. We're not exactly sure how his lawyers plan on defending him specifically, but we are getting some clues. I want to bring in Charles Patrick Ewing. He is a board-certified forensic psychologist and a distinguished service professor and professor of law emeritus at SUNY Buffalo. Also here with me, Joey Jackson, is a legal analyst and defense attorney. Glad to have both of you here. Joey, let me begin with you. Can you first quickly explain to us why Mangione has a second-degree murder charge as opposed to a first-degree charge in New York?
Yeah, Laura, good to be with you. So what happens is that in New York State, first degree murder is reserved for the killing of a police officer, a peace officer, a judge, a correction officer, a first responder. You don't generally get first degree murder unless it pertains to one of those issues. The only other conceivable way that it could be first degree is if it's in furtherance of some act of terrorism, which could be a viable charge depending upon, of course, what authorities continue to find with respect to that is Luigi Mangione's state of mind, mindset as it relates to the actual crime. Murder in the second degree, however, is preserved for everything else, and that is intentional murder. And so generally, people who are charged in New York State with murder are charged with murder in the second degree, absent one of those delineated consequences or actions that I noted before.
Really important to get that distinction. Thanks, Joey. Let me turn to you, Charles. We're getting some hints as to what Mangione's defense could possibly look like. A former CNN contributor, Karen Agnifilo, just signed on to represent him. A few days earlier, here's what she told CNN.
And so it'll be interesting, it'll be interesting to see where the opportunities are for him to defend himself. And it's looking more and more like I think he could potentially mount a psychiatric defense. And I think what Marianne was just saying is exactly right, because was he playing to the cameras versus is he having some sort of psychiatric event happening right as we speak, and are we watching it in real time on TV? That those are some of the things that will come into play, I think, in this case.
Charles, how hard is it to get this kind of insanity plea or an extreme emotional disturbance plea, if he gets offered a plea at all, to have this line of thinking?
Well, it's extremely difficult to make out an insanity defense, especially in New York State. In New York State, the burden of proof is on the defendant to prove, first of all, that he was suffering from a mental illness or from a mental defect, as the law says, which would be the equivalent of an intellectual disability. That's just the beginning. Once you have that, then you have to establish to the jury's satisfaction that you either did not know the nature and consequences of your acts, or you did not know that your acts were wrong. That's a tough sell. About maybe somewhere less than 1% of all criminal cases that go to trial with an insanity plea. And among those cases,
I want to hear that point, but go ahead, Charles. Excuse me.
Yeah, they almost never result in a finding of insanity. But it's so difficult to get that finding from a jury. And without speaking to the merits of this case in particular, because I don't want to do that, but I will say that it's a virtual certainty that his lawyer will consider an insanity defense and will have him examined by a forensic psychologist or psychiatrist, or maybe even more. But given what we know from what is currently in the public domain, it will be an extremely difficult case to get a judgment of insanity.